So in this video, I'm going to talk about a variety of different characters and Familia members and why some of them may or may not join Hestia's Familia. So this will contain some spoilers as I'm going to be talking about future possibility volumes and where the story will go, and more just talking about the general idea of where I think the author is trying to take the story based on what Volume 18 has entailed. And again, Volume 18 has released in Japan. It's not a Western release yet. There is some chatter and the author has kind of hinted, but nothing official, that Volume 19 may also come out this year as well, which is a big deal, being that Volume 18 just came out this year. But there's some hints, so we'll just have to wait and see. So I want to talk about what the possibilities are, because I think a lot of people are speculating that because of certain events that played out in Volume 18 with Freya's Familia members and the disbanding, that a lot of them are going to be looking for new homes. I think some will probably leave the city, some will probably do their own thing, but I do think some will stay and possibly join other familiars. And I don't think, and I'm just going to put this straight out there, this is just my opinion, I don't think any of them are going to join Hestia's Familia. And I'll explain why. I think some could end up joining Loki's Familia. Some might join another particular sort of shady particular god that likes to kind of do things underhanded but isn't particularly bad, if you get my general drift. Hermes. But I think most of them are going to kind of do their own thing, but I think most of them will come and go out of the adventures of Bel. They'll help him when he needs help, but they won't all be there. And the reason why I think they'll do this is because I don't think the writer wants to add too many more members to Hestia's Familia. Now, it doesn't mean that none won't join. I think there is potential for some to join. Maybe a particular elf from a particular bar. That's definitely a high possibility, and I think that's probably the most likely to happen. I don't think the likes of like Otter is going to join, no, and other particular members. And I just think a lot of that comes down to not over complicating the story. It's one of the reasons why I believe that the writer went down the direction of removing Freya out of the story and keeping Sia in the story. And so what do I mean by that? Well, with Freya, she had a dual identity. We all know that from the volumes. But because of that, if the author kept Freya and Sia, that would mean that you would have to keep adding sort of a bit of juggling. You'd have to play a game of juggling, of playing with these two characters. And what the author has done is just gone, you know what, I'm just going to remove one of them and just have Sia as the main one. Freya becomes Sia and lives her life as that. It makes it a lot easier to write the story, because clearly the author intends to continue writing, so they probably want to add new characters, add new major plot points, maybe new gods and goddesses. As you can clearly tell, major things are going to happen, so it's going to add more complexity to the story. So trying to simplify some aspects of it is probably a smart idea. That's why killing off characters can be seen as a good thing, but with the style of story that DanMachi is, killing off a character is very unlikely unless it's a really minor character that plays no major significant role. You look at Loki's side story volumes, there was one character that died, and that was like the most minor character out there, unless you were really attached to the Loki Familia members. But for most people, it wasn't really that significant. And again, that's just how I perceive it. Could be wrong. But what it does is it brings up, by having these other Familia members coming in and out of the party, it means that if Bel goes on an adventure, some can join and some don't have to. And the reasoning can be as simple as, well, we're off doing our own thing. It can be a simple, easy reason. But if they all, well, at least if a lot of them were to join, let's just say hypothetically a half a dozen, say 4, 5, maybe 3, or even 2. But I think what some fans are hoping for is a couple of major members, like 2 from, say, from Freya's Familia members, Ryuu or our elf herself joining. So it'd be around 3, but some also have other favorites that they want joining as well. So say 2 to 5, give or take. What happens is that means those characters have to come along on most of Bel's adventures, and if they don't come along, then the story has to explain why they're not there in a much more detailed manner, because they're part of Hestia's Familia. So they have to explain in better detail the reasoning for them to not be part of that adventure that they're going down, which means there are more characters that need to be part of that group, which means it's more explaining the writer has to do, and so it adds more layers. And it also means that the writer can't add other characters in to join in on those adventures as well, jumping in and out, like kind of like guest stars, like superhero movies these days, where you have different heroes jumping in and out of each other's movies or TV series, kind of like that. by adding all these extra characters, you lose that flexibility. It doesn't mean you can't do it, it just reduces the flexibility. By having them not join and having them staying part of different groups, it means some of them can join and some of them don't have to, and you can try and keep as many of these side characters as relevant as possible, whether through side stories or through the main story, and having them jump in and out of Belle's adventures. But the more you add to Hestia's Familia, the more girls are going to be fighting over him, which just adds more to their harem and constant needing attention. But it also just adds more complexity to the story as well. And that's why I said what I just said about Loki's Familia, because there are so many characters in Loki's Familia that a lot of the characters just kind of go over my head when I read about them, and I don't really care, because there's the main sort of cast that I care about, and then there's this sort of other layers, the second and the third layer of characters. And some of those I've literally forgotten who they are. Like, I can't even remember them. I can't even remember what they've done in the story, because they are so insignificant. You need to go back, reread it, and remember what they've done and the roles that they play. So as much as adding heaps of characters to a story can be kind of fun in the sense of adding all these complexities and crazy things going on, it adds more room for the author to also make errors, to create plot holes, to create awkward timelines and events, and it also just adds way too much complexity. It kind of reminds me of another light novel series, Overlord, that I would like to discuss in a separate video about why I think the author should have not added as many characters as they did, because it kind of follows the same issue where if you add too many characters, then maybe your favorite character just never gets any life or day. And I would prefer to see less characters with more depth put behind them than a massive cast of characters that you barely get to see, and you just kind of feel like, oh, that's an interesting character, and then that's it. You never see them ever again. And the fact that Belle and Eyes are going on their own adventures, and I feel like at some point in the story they're going to come closer and closer and closer together, which means the two familiars are going to have to interact more often, and seeing how that's going to play out, and will Loki and Hestia play nice, at least to a degree. I mean, they can have a love-hate relationship and still have fun at each other. That's the kind of whole gag of it and the enjoyment, but will they play at least somewhat nice and work together to achieve the overall goal of working together, especially seeing as they'll probably be forced to, because Eyes and her friends and Belle and his friends are probably going to be working together, and Belle and Eyes having feelings for each other. It's an obvious path. So it's just, to me, it's like one of those where it's like, you don't want to add too many new characters. I definitely see a particular elf from the bar joining, and maybe her friends coming and going as well. And let's just say, without spoiling too much there, because that's another topic for another video, some of the girls in that bar have some really amazing powers that have been explained in volume 18. One, kind of the opposite effect to a particular fox girl, where a fox girl buffs people, one of the bar maidens can do the opposite effect, slightly different but very similar. It's kind of like a coin flip. It kind of debuffs them and reduces stats rather than buffs them up with a level up. It's a kind of like not an exact degrade of a level, but kind of like debuffing stats. So it's very powerful, some of these members, and I think they will play a big part of the story going forward in helping Belle and their adventures, and possibility that they might join other familiars so that they can get their stats updated, so that they can help Belle and his journey when they need it, having to take time off of their duties at the bar. And that's the thing, it's an easy explaining too why they do and don't join. Some of them might join and some of them won't, because they need to make sure the bar's running, because Mamma Mia wants that bar to be always running and serving the customers. So it's a good explaining, and it doesn't need anything in depth of why they're busy. They just go, yeah, I'm busy, got to do with the bar, and the others may go or they may not. It all just depends. When you end up adding them all to Hestia's Familia, you then have to come up with more major plot points to explain why characters may or may not be busy, or they're just going to always be there, which then adds more layers. So I hope that kind of explains why I think really the only character I see is going to be the elf, Ryuu herself, just because of the bond that she has with Belle. That's the only character that I think personally that will join Belle's Familia. But even then, I think that's kind of iffy, because she can still go back to her goddess and get a status update whenever she needs as well. And at least from the sounds of it, it does sound like that maybe she might be making a return as well, just based on my speculation of the idea of that there's new Familia members that have joined. She's still around. I still see that as an opportunity that they may play a major role later on that might end up helping Belle and their journeys as well. So I think that's where maybe she, our elf herself, the one that everyone ships with Belle, is kind of maybe like a bridge between those two familiars and then working together on some major objectives going forward. So I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Tell me what you think. Give me ideas of why I'm wrong, because then it can be a follow-up video discussing maybe why other characters might make more sense or why other characters don't make sense, or just the different areas that I may have missed, because it's always fun reading good comments where people give really good ideas of what they think's going to happen and then playing that devil's advocate and saying, hey, this might work, that might not work. So again, love to know your thoughts. Of course, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.